Welcome everyone to this intense matchup between Fabiano Caruana and Javokhir Sindarov in the semifinals of the Freestyle Chess 2025. Their two classical games ended in draws, then 10 plus 10 also ended in draws, and now we are down to 5 minutes plus 2 seconds increment, two games. And in case if it ends in 1-1, we will go into an Armageddon. There you see both the players are ready and we are about to kick off. Fabi has the white pieces, a handshake, and off we go. Caruana opens the game with 1 e4, opening up his bishop, and you can see Sindarov taking his time because the position is new. You have the knights, bishops, queen here. He pushes e5, pawn to g3, activating the queen, and maybe he can bring the bishop out from this side. It's all about piece activity here. You want to push f4, get all your pieces rolling. That would be very nice. And you can see that Sindarov is taking his time in the opening, which is very logical because you don't want to land up in a position where you just are lost out of the opening. It's unusual position, and you know, something like bishop h3 would suddenly attack the d7 pawn and you don't know how to react. So being very careful there about his possibilities there, Sindarov, and taking his time at the start. He now plays his knight to c6, controlling the center with his knight here, and you can see he's already down to 4 minutes on the clock. Fabiano Caruana, one of the best freestyle players in the world, pushes his pawn to f4. Gets more center control. Maybe later he would like to put his knight on f3 and then push d4 as well. f6 by Sindarov, opening up his bishop on the long diagonal. Let's see what Caruana now responds back. He brings his knight to c3. Gets one knight out in the game. It's often very difficult to play blitz in freestyle chess because you don't have time to get used to the position. It's completely new, so mistakes are bound to happen here. He brings his knight to d6. In a way, this move makes the knight come in between the bishop, and it's not doing much because the pawn is protected. I think it's very logical for Caruana to bring his knight out to f3 in order to play d4. Yes, he plays his bishop first to h3, attacking here on d7. If bishop e6, maybe you can even take and double the pawns. So perhaps Sindarov may not want to do that. He's thinking there, rook d8 seems like a fair move. He plays rook d8. And Caruana now once again in the think tank. Well, apart from knight f3, there is also a possibility to play b3 just to improve the position of the king, stopping knight c4. You can also go queen g2 perhaps, just improving the queen very slightly. So Fabi here taking his time and now plays his knight to f3. Good move. He's trying to go d4. And Sindarov can go g5. Very interesting move because after take knight g5, there are possibilities of activating the queen. The knight can jump in here, but instead he goes g6. And maybe not the best move, best decision. And Caruana can simply go d4, which is a very natural move. Very strong move as well here to go d4. And let's see if Fabi actually goes for it. It's under pressure here. Three minutes for Fabi. He goes rook e1 first. The time is now almost equal. The players are being careful with how they use their time in the opening. Bishop h6. I like this move. Putting pressure on the f4 pawn. Fe5 is something that black would love, because then his bishop is activated. He has equal space in the center. And that's something that he would want here. Caruana thinking a lot. He's going to almost 2 minutes on the clock. I believe the players are just using this thing in their mind that let us get a decent playable position, and then even if we have a minute left on the clock, we'll be able to manage. So bishop c5 played. A nice move, because if pawn takes pawn, bishop takes, pawn takes, and the structure is spoiled, and you can even like long castle, and white is giving up a pawn but has great compensation. So Sindarov now has to decide whether he wants to get greedy and capture the pawn and allow this breaking of his structure, or does not want to allow that. Not an easy question by any means. 2 minutes 16 seconds for Fabiano Caruana. 2 minutes 55 seconds is what Sindarov began his thinking on this position with, and he might go down below 2 minutes on the clock. Wow, he's taking a lot of time here, Javokhir, and plays knight to c4 after exactly a minute of thought. That's a lot. He's putting pressure on the d2 pawn, but I can just push it away, right, with d3. There are no real tactics that are happening, and I think d3 just works. He pushes it away. The knight goes back to b6. And now Fabi plays his pawn to a4, a fantastic move. He wants to push the knight even further with a5. And Sindarov is definitely in big trouble here. If he pushes a5, then we can just take the knight, double the pawns, get the b5 outpost. There's a lot to play for here. Maybe for Javokhir, one smart thing to do is to just somehow get his queen into the game. But then there is a5, a6. How do you get yourself around this situation is the question. 1 minute 51 seconds for Fabi. 1 minute 11 seconds for Javokhir. He goes knight c8. And Fabi gains even more space with e5. Fantastic move. b6 played. Wow. b6 opens up the a file because the rook is sitting here and is perfectly positioned to enter. Caruana deciding whether he should take the pawn or not. He takes, pawn takes, rook, king takes, and the bishop comes back to e3, defending the f4 pawn. Slowly and steadily, white can now unravel the position and get to the a file. b3, king b2, rook a1. Fabi goes d4. He's playing in the center. This is a fantastic move by the world-class GM. And whoever gets the lead in this game will surely have excellent chances of winning this match. He goes king to b8, just keeping his king away from the a file, also away from the diagonal of the queen here. Pushes forward, knight to a5 played. The queen comes to f1. Fantastic move by Caruana. He's going queen a6, knight b5. He wants to attack. And Sindarov now very low on time, Very poor position as well. He goes queen e7, but how is that helping against queen a6? Maybe he wants to go queen b4, knight c4 and launch his own attack, own mating attack. So let's see what Caruana comes up with here. Fabi takes fe. He plays bishop takes bishop. And now, rook takes would be a very, very logical move. But there are also possibilities of e takes f6. There's also this d6 move, which is very, very interesting. But does Fabi have enough time to calculate all of this? I guess not. And so the smartest decision would be to take. But no, he goes d6. He pushes his pawn to d6. Very interesting. He wants to simply break black structure. He takes with the pawn. ef, queen f6. And now takes back with the rook. Knight to c4. Rook comes to d3. Well, maybe here already black is coming back into the game. Because now his pieces are playing. He has the e5 square. Knight e7 trying to come to c6. And Caruana with 30 seconds on the clock needs to speed up here. He's thinking, he goes queen to g1. Keeping an eye on the b6 pawn. But I think just king b7 makes a lot of sense to improve the position of the king. He does it. King b7 on the board. And now b3, knight goes to e5. Takes, queen takes. Queen d1 played. And now the bishop comes to e6. Fantastic defense by Javokhir here. Bishop g2 and now rook a8. It seems like the tables have turned. Black is playing super quick. King b2. And he plays queen to c5. King goes back. Rook check. Knight jumps in. Now the knight is entering the battle as well. King b2. Queen a5 played. King c1. And knight comes into the center. He chops off the pawn, but a check. And if the king comes to d2, he'll lose the rook. And so Fabiano resigns. Javokhir Sindarov strikes first blood. Now leading the match with a score of 1-0 as we head into a must-win scenario for Fabiano in the next Blitz game. With 1-0 lead in the match now, Javokhir Sindarov has the white pieces. He can close the match with a draw here. Fabiano Caruana has to win at all costs. This is a very, very crucial game for both the players. Let's see if Sindarov can win this and make it to the finals. It would be a dream run for him. He opens the game with 1 g3, g6, pushes the pawn to c4, and we have d6 on the board. You can see that this position is very similar to a normal game of chess, apart from the fact that, the minor pieces are in the corner. But once you castle, it will look pretty normal. So Sindarov taking his time here, and rightly so, in order to decide where his pieces belong. He's already fianchettoed his bishop, so he goes d3. A very nice move. Just wanting to get the knight out, queen up, knight out, and then short castle. And that would be a real English then. And now Fabi decides to take his time as well, because he has to decide in what way he wants his pieces to be in. He can opt for c5 here to go for symmetry. He goes f5 because he wants to win. That's very important here. Queen d2. Improving the position of his queen. And knight to f6 seems very likely. Caruana brings his knight out first. Knight to d7. And now the knight comes out to c3. The other knight comes to f6. Slowly and steadily the pieces are coming out. It's a very standard position here. Now I would play knight to f3 here, but there's also a possibility to push your queenside pawns b4, b5. The other idea is to push e3 and the knight to e2. That would be also an interesting plan here. The time is right now 4 minutes, around 4 minutes for Sindarov. And he pushes pawn to e3. He goes for this plan of e3, knight e2. He's down to 3 minutes 37 seconds. And now brings his knight to e2. Caruana brings the queen up to e7. Both players want to simply castle here. Castle, castle. I don't think Caruana wants to long castle because then b4 and the attack can begin. Ooh, anyway, Sindarov goes b4. He begins with his queenside expansion. Clearly, white is in a very good position here. Not just in this game, but also from the tournament perspective. And now pawn to b6, offering the trade of bishops. So you could take here, or you could even castle here, so that if black takes, you can take back with the king. So these are the two options. Takes on h1, rook takes. And now short castle seems like a natural move here. Yes, he brings his king up. He was a bit confused what to do because the rook did not have to move for the castling. And now Caruana will also short castle. Well, he could also decide to keep his king in the center and play h5, h4 with some attacking chances, but that would be a bit too risky. So he castles here. 2 minutes 51 seconds for Sindarov, 3 minutes 25 seconds for Fabi. Generally in such positions, the plans revolve around a4, a5, expanding on the queen side, sometimes putting your knight on d5, which he has done instantly. And the point is that after knight takes knight, pawn takes, which Fabi has done, the c7 pawn is weak, but Caruana simply defends it with the queen and attacks the d5 pawn. Not so easy to defend it. You can't go e4 because it's simply losing that pawn, knight e4. So the most logical move is to play knight to c3. Sindarov is now taking his time. And the other idea could be to just give up this pawn. Rook c6, knight takes pawn, and then just bring the other rook in to attack here. Wow, the time is now less than 2 minutes for Sindarov. He plays his knight to c3 with 1 minute 44 seconds, a6. Very quickly played by Caruana. Now putting the time pressure on Sindarov, stopping his knight from coming to b5. How does Javokhir continue here? He goes e4. But I guess it's time for Fabi now to get the position rolling with f4. Although with f4 it's not so clear whether the attack will break through or not. Because firstly you don't want to win the pawn because knight h5 and black has immense compensation. It's a great position. So he does play f4. But now White can simply play the move f3, which is a very powerful move, which makes the move f4 kind of positionally incorrect. Why is that the case? Because after now g4, white would have successfully closed the king side. Now Caruana, with 3 minutes on the clock, has 2 extra minutes as compared to Sindarov. But he definitely needs to win. So he goes bishop to g7. And his plan could be to play bishop h6 here. Keep an eye on that diagonal. But Sindarov just plays knight to e2. He asks a question to the pawn on f4. What are you doing? If knight goes to h5, I already have g4 here to hit the knight. And Sindarov coming really close to qualifying to the finals, setting up a clash with Vincent Keimer to fight for $200,000. That's a lot at stake. And he would also confirm $140,000 for himself. Now Caruana taking his time here because he has that on the clock to figure out what to do. So on the queen side, he's kind of outplayed. He cannot push anything. His pawn on c7 is a big weakness. But on the king side, also, what to do? Should he take here? He plays g5 and pawn takes pawn. It's a very sharp move. Takes back with the g pawn and now king goes to the side. In fact, white is going to try and attack now around the g file. King h8. Rook goes to g1. Some point this deadly rook sack could come in. 52 seconds for Javokhir Sindarov. He's starting to move very quickly. Queen f7. And maybe now the next obvious move for him. d4. Well, the thing is, if you play d4, maybe queen h5 to attack f3 pawn. But he does play it. Because now if queen h5, you have rook f1 to defend this pawn. So it's not a big problem. And Caruana gets the rook into the game. Pawn takes pawn, pawn takes pawn. And goes rook g2. Just calmly advancing the rook. Planning to get the other rook to g1. Queen comes to h5. He goes queen d3. Moving the queen up. Defending the pawn. White is totally winning here. Now the c7 pawn is hanging. He defends it with rook f7. Caruana down to 44 seconds. 32 seconds for Sindarov. Rook g1. Maybe some ideas like knight f4, ef4, rook g7, bishop h6 played. Stopping all knight f4 ideas. And can Sindarov go and pick up the pawn? Not really, because f3 is hanging. So he goes bishop c3. With just 15 seconds on the clock. Caruana has 34 seconds. It's a lot of pressure there. b5 played. And now this incredible move, knight d4 is winning, but of course very difficult to find. So he plays bishop b2. And rook goes to g8, offering a trade. Queen comes to c3. He takes on g2. Rook takes on g2. And now the e5 pawn is falling. So he goes rook e7 to defend the pawn. And queen to c5, attacking the rook. The bishop comes back. Now the f3 pawn is hanging, so queen comes back to f2. Wow. He goes rook f7, a3. Bishop comes and defends the pawn. Knight to g1. He also defends there. Queen goes to a7. And king h7. Now you can simply chop off the pawn. One pawn bites the dust. Queen h4. Another pawn bites the dust. Knight to e4. Great move if queen d3 is winning. No, he misses it. f3. Knight takes. Rook takes. It's still a draw if queen e2. But he plays queen d7 check. A blunder. Bishop e7 blocks. And Sindarov plays queen e6. But there's rook f1 and he resigns because rook g1, queen e4 is a checkmate. Fabiano Caruana has done it. He's equalized the scores and taken the match into an Armageddon. What a guy. What a guy he is. And now, Fabiano Caruana has bid 4 minutes 15 seconds here at this moment. 4 minutes 15 seconds. And so he's got the black pieces. Sindarov has 5 minutes on the clock. And if Sindarov wins, he goes through to the finals. This is the Armageddon. And if Caruana wins or even draws, he makes it to the finals. So he has the draw odds. But for that, he has 45 seconds less on the clock. A handshake, pawn to c4, d5 play, takes, queen takes. Now the knight comes out. He pushes forward. Look at the speed at which Sindarov is playing here. He doesn't want to lose this. Already we have an unusual position, but not very, because white is going to short castle. The knight is on f3. Yes, the knight on e3 is slightly weird. Wow, what a match this is turning out to be. Fabiano Caruana was on the verge of getting eliminated, but that chance which he got, he didn't leave it. It's now 1-1. And it will be very difficult for Sindarov to recover from that loss. Both players castle. Now somewhere I feel like this position is much more simple than any chess 960 positions, because it's just after 6 moves has gone quite into the normal positions of chess. Goes b3. His plan is to develop the bishop on b2. And Fabi now needs to decide the setup he wants to take. Pawn to e6 does close the bishop here. He goes bishop b2, bishop b7, both have fianchettoed. And now pawn to d4, right in the center, heart of the position. This does give a very, very Queen's Gambit accepted kind of a feel. Pawn takes pawn. Queen takes pawn. Takes the queen. Knight takes. Knight to d6. Now one thing that white is playing for here is the c6 weakness. That is a weak square. And if a knight does sit in there, it would be a monstrous knight. He goes bishop d3. Of course, Caruana doesn't want to make a move like e5, which is very weakening. He goes knight d4. And I like this move. Very logical, very safe, very calm. If you push me with f3, I'll go to c5 and attack this bishop. Sindarov goes with his knight to f5. He's attacking the pawn on e7. This time the roles have been reversed from the last game. In the last game, Fabi had to play for a win. This time it's Sindarov, and he's taking some insane risks in order to win. You can see that he's gotten his knight to e7 and almost trapped it behind the enemy lines. But that knight can come out. 3 minutes for Sindarov, 3 minutes for Fabi. What an equal match this is. Turning out to be Rook C1. He plays his knight to C5. The bishop is attacked. Now Sindarov is thinking where to go with his bishop. He doesn't want to give it up. He goes bishop c2, a slightly weird move. Fabi goes bishop d6 and attacks the knight. The knight comes to c6. And he goes rook c8, attacking the knight again. Amazing defense here. Knight b4. He takes on b3 and bishop b4. And tactically, black has won a pawn here. Amazing. Bishop to c5. And now Caruana is a pawn up, a clean pawn up. And he just needs a draw. This is going to be very tough for Sindarov, but he's fighting. He wants to get his knight to c7. So rook d8 played. And still knight c7 is possible, but now rook c8 would be very strong for black. And Sindarov knows that he is in big trouble. He goes e3. And bishop comes up to c4. He's attacking the a6 pawn here. But is this going to help? Because the knight is almost trapped here on c7. He goes knight to d7. The bishop goes back to g3. Maybe now it's time to push the pawn. Yes, b5. A great move. And Sindarov thinking now what to do. He plays his knight to e6. Wow. Well, Sindarov hoping against hope for some counterplay here. Takes, bishop takes. One minute 18 seconds for Sindarov. 1 minute 50 seconds for Fabi. The way in which Fabi has played this game is just outstanding. The bishop goes back to b6. He takes on c8, bishop takes. And the rook comes to d1, pinning the knight. But it's not a very dangerous pin. Yes, you have problems with bishop h4. And Fabiano knows he's so close to qualifying. He finds this move, rook e8, which is a beautiful one. Because if bishop d7, there's rook d8. Pinning here. So Sindarov plays rook to d6. Knight to f8 played, offering a trade here of the bishops. But bishop takes bishop, rook takes, and now there's a back rank mate, so there's no time. So king f1 played. And now goes bishop c5, rook takes pawn, king comes out. Caruana is good at converting such positions. He's just making sure not to make any mistakes. And he resigns here because the bishop was hanging and knight c5 threatened. And with this, Fabiano Caruana makes it to the finals of the Freestyle Chess Grand Slam 2025 in Weissenhaus, Germany. Javokhir Sindarov, the last minute replacement in this tournament for Vishy Anand, has won everyone's heart by topping the round robin section, then beating his much esteemed opponent Hikaru Nakamura, and now giving a real tough fight to Fabiano Caruana.